Please rise.
Thank you. You can be seated.
Sure. Of course.
So, Mr. Moran, I understand you have something to talk about with the next witness after Ms. Saxton?
Yes, Your Honor. Let me know when.
I'm ready when you are.
Great. So the court allows, and it doesn't relate to that.
Well, does it really matter?
Under 807, there's the avenue of mission for the Colorado 7. The statement from my Nava had greater additional responsibility. By law enforcement, and it was 1 year, 7 months, 19 days after Dylan went missing. So in the interim, there had been vigils, there was a nationally broadcast television show, and countless news accounts. So the spotlight was shining brightly, and 807 requires indicia of reliability that are not present with his statements. The circumstantial guarantees of trustworthiness that would be present in statements made by...
Hold on a second. You cannot talk in this courtroom while we're on the record. And if you do it again, I'll kick everybody out. Thank you. Go ahead.
So the statements that the friends and the peers of Dylan had made to law enforcement in approximately November and December 2012, when they're remarking about things Dylan had told them, those statements have those circumstantial guarantees of trustworthiness in a way that remarks made 19 months and 19 days later does not. So we would object to admission of those statements under 807 on that basis. And we would also constitutionalize that objection under the Sixth Amendment Confrontation Clause, the United States Constitution, and the more stringent protections of Colorado Constitution, Article 2, Section 16. And I'm, of course, referring here to Colorado Rule of Evidence 807 and its requirement of circumstantial guarantees of trustworthiness.
So I don't remember Adam Harvey. Whose witness is this going to be? Okay. I don't remember Adam Harvey. I don't remember doing a hearing about this. Was this not brought up before? I know you weren't part of the case back then, but.
Yes, Your Honor, that is correct. It predates my involvement, but I do believe 807 notice was provided and ruled on previously. I can just make a very brief record of the
Sure.
Counsel's correct as to the date, but I believe respectfully incorrect as to the law and consequences of the delay between the incident and the interview of Mr. Harvey. Certainly counsel can cross-examine him, and 807 notice was provided with this in mind. But Mr. Harvey's testimony is fairly direct and focused and corroborated by photographic evidence. So while counsel can inquire if he wishes about TV coverage and so on, that's appropriate for cross-examination if you choose to do so, but should not bar the witness from testifying. And again, I do believe this was an issue ruled on by the court previously. My information from co-counsel, and I certainly don't think the delay in this case, particularly since it's a cold case homicide, should preclude the witness from testifying.
Judge, if it's helpful, I think June 24th of 2019 report, that was the date filed with the preliminary order regarding the admissibility of hearsay statements under the sequel of hearsay rule B4 and 1. And there were 12 attachments. One included Adam Harvey's statement.
I appreciate Mr. Johnson's assistance, Your Honor.
Yeah, me too. Anything else you want to say?
Only that Senator Doherty referenced the photograph. I don't think it's it just strictly the objected to. When the issue with photographs that no objection necessary with respect to remarks about Mr. Redwine that Adam Harvey's recollection in the month after the wife was died. Redwine was 35 when he passed the trial. That's why we're concerned that Adam is saying so long after that having contact on the last is there trusted that should be required when we're violating or when we're coming up against a constitutional requiring each area. Is it part of you further?
Well, you know, well, hold on, because I don't remember this at all. So if it was attached, I guess I'll look at P4 and P5, and maybe you guys can go around and juggle your witnesses a little bit. I just don't remember. I would assume, had we ruled on it before, and I let it in, it comes in, but now you're telling me there's another reason not to let it in? Why wasn't it brought up before? I mean, even if I didn't give you a full ruling, why wasn't it brought up before if this was an issue? Well, I'm asking you, if you thought that maybe I left you an out, why didn't that get litigated before? We've had years to do this. I issued an order, apparently, saying this was okay. Why are you telling me now it's not? Why couldn't you do this 6 months ago? A year ago?
The order of court was the party introduced how it's feasible to follow up on that issue. So as the party that is I don't think it's right.
Why wasn't confrontation brought up then, back when we did this hearing?
It was.
And I ruled against you, apparently.
That's what the issue with 807 is order, and they were request by the court to follow up by the prosecution to address the other issues that we had that or that we found up in the system.
What is the 404B evidence that's coming in?
Your Honor, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll just touch briefly on the evidence, and then Mr. Johnson can talk about the motion in order.
I think that would make sense.
I do believe the court's ruled on this previously, and of course I follow and comply with the court's order. It was issued in 2019. Mr. Harvey's going to testify about a sleepover in November of 2012. Photographs that counsel and I agree should be admitted of Dylan and his friends, the fact that he had no injuries on his face at the time, which is corroborated by the photographs, and that he was not, that he had to go to Bayfield for Thanksgiving for the holiday, but was not excited to go visit his father. That's the extent of it for Mr. Harvey, Your Honor, and it's in the report that was filed as part of the motion, and I'm going to stop here and turn to Mr. Johnson, if that's okay.
No, you don't need to. As of right now, I'm going to let it in. I'm going to look at my order while Ms. Saxton finishes testifying.
Sure.
I'll try and do two things at once.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. So with that, is the jury outside there, or do you know? Okay. Not yet? Okay.
Your Honor.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry. Am I to understand the jury's not back yet?
Not yet.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question of the court?
Sure.
Yesterday, counsel had put a transcript on the screen, and I just wanted to follow up since I'm new to your honest courtroom. You've said any transcript introduced had to be accurate, and I just wanted to make sure, are you saying accurate based on the people participating in the conversation or accurate based on some outside source? Because I do have a witness testifying later today, and a transcript, while not absolutely critical, would be part of the testimony.
Well, are you seeking to introduce the transcript?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I haven't dealt with transcripts. You guys probably don't know this case, but the last big case, a huge case in this courtroom, the Sissy Taylor case, that was about 30 years ago. At that point, there needed to be a finding that the transcript would be helpful to the jury. The jury had to be instructed when they were looking at the transcript that if there was a difference between the transcript and what they heard, are you going to be playing the audio of that also?
Yes, Your Honor.
They needed to be instructed that if they heard something different, they would remember what they heard, and there had to be a finding that the transcript was accurate. Those things have not been done. Maybe the law has changed. It was 30 years ago, but I don't think it has been. So that's my concern. So we may all be doing a little quick research over the lunch hour.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. If I could just add, the witness would testify that the transcript is accurate based on her review of it and listening to the audio. And it's done simply to aid the jury in listening to the audio. So that's why I wanted to see.
But does the jury need that to understand? And that's what I remember from, like I say, it was 30 years ago. I could be wrong, but that's my memory of it.
Okay. So I'll take a look at the law as well. So
all right.
That would help. Thank you, Your Honor.
So we've got more people in the courtroom now, and I know things, well, I can do it when the jury comes in. That's okay. Bring them on in. Everybody right? Everybody be seated. Ms. Saxton, come back up to the witness stand. You're still under oath. Just have a seat. And before we start, I just want to let people out in the gallery and the audience know that even though you may think it's okay to talk back there, it's not, particularly when we're on the record, and it will really annoy me, and I may end up kicking you guys out of the courtroom. So I'd appreciate, I'm talking up here, or counselor talking, and Ms. Grigsby is reporting. You are quiet. Whispers we can hear, and it's very disturbing. So, ready for a cross?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Ms. Saxton, if I'm mumbling or I mess up a question, you don't understand what I'm asking, you just let me or the judge know, and I will course correct, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
I don't know if you have People's 35 in front of you. It's kind of the white piece of paper. Okay.
I do.
And you testified on direct that, based upon your recollection, that's an accurate record of some text that went between you and Dylan Redwine the night of November 18th, I believe.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, refresh all of our memories. It sounds like there were several different devices that you were texting back and forth with Dylan, and it was a different time, different, I don't know, maybe it was 3G, I don't know. But inform the jury of of the devices you were using to text with Dylan that night.
Sure. I was texting him. I'm sorry. You mean that night in particular?
Yeah, the 17th and the 18th.
Okay, so that in a whole. Okay. So yes, I was texting him off of my personal cell phone, and I was texting him off of my mother's personal cell phone, and then I texted him off of my iPod.
And again, turning your attention to People's 35, sounds like which devices are being used on your end for this?
It would be my iPod.
Okay. And to use an iPod to text someone in fall of 2012, you had to have a special application or an app, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that was Text Plus, right?
Yes.
Okay. And People's 35 is a rendition of the Text Plus
Yes.
messages, safe to say?
Yes.
Okay. And one thing you got asked on direct concerned the very last message, and I'd turn your attention to the bottom of People's 35. And I'm going to turn your attention to the last three messages just to reorient everyone. Third from the bottom says sissy, 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 correct?
Yes.
And that is from?
Dylan.
Okay. So Dylan's calling you by your nickname, I take it?
Yes.
Sissy, sissy, sissy. You call him by your name for him, Kitty, 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 right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last message after y'all calling each other nicknames comes from Dylan, correct?
Yes.
And that one is, as contained on People's 35, says, is pimping, right?
Yes.
And as you stated on direct, that's a phrase, a term that he used all the time, right?
Yes.
Okay. Used it when he was talking to you in person?
I can't recall if he would use it in person.
More so on text and instant messages?
Yes.
Okay. So that's not a message from Dylan as far as the verbiage goes. It seems weird to you or uncharacteristic.
No.
Okay.
It's, in terms of the text messages itself, it's pretty characteristic for him on text.
Okay. And you testified on direct that obviously you were very close with Dylan.
Yes.
And remind us of when you met him and how you met him.
Sure. I met him in 4th grade. I met him at elementary school, and he was one of my first friends there.
Right.
So we were close.
And what sort of stuff did he like to do in the outdoors, if you know?
I don't really know, or I can't really recall. I just remember hanging out a lot, either at church or on the playground. So.
Okay. And it's been a long time. I get that.
Yes.
And you say you don't remember what sort of things he liked to do in the outdoors. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've been interviewed by all sorts of folks about this situation, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall telling FBI agent Joseph Lunaro that you recall Dylan liked to hunt and fish and ride four-wheel terrain vehicles?
Now that I'm thinking about it now, yes, I do remember saying that.
And safe to say, because you were texting with Dylan communicating with Dylan on several different devices on the 17th and 18th, not all of those text messages and messages on your end have been saved, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And that was because, at least on your phone, you ran out of storage and you had to delete some of those messages. Is that right?
I can't recall.
And again, it's been a long time. You've talked to a lot of people. Do you recall telling FBI agent Joseph Funaro that you couldn't recall the exact times of your text message conversation with Dylan on the 17th and 18th? You had erased the messages because your cell phone's memory had become full. Do you remember telling that to FBI agent Funaro?
I can't recall.
Would looking at Agent Funaro's report help you remember, you think?
Yeah, yes.
Permission to approach with 17814 discovery?
Yes.
And I'm going to put a report in front of you, and I don't want you to read out loud from it. I'm going to show you where I think this may help.
Okay.
And if it helps you remember saying that, then we'll have that conversation, okay? But I'm not asking you to start reading or anything. Are we good on that? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't recall.
Okay, so Agent Funaro's report about his interview with you does not refresh your recollection to making that statement?
No.
Okay. Can I get that back, please?
Yes, please.
One of the things you just mentioned is that you knew Dylan from school from the 4th grade, right?
Yes.
And you knew him from church as well, is that correct?
We went to youth group together, yes.
Right. And obviously you talked about you've seen him, you know him, you've interacted with him, you're interacting with him at this time. You consider him a dear, dear friend, safe to say.
Yes.
And safe to say, you know from watching Dylan, from talking to him, from going through childhood together, that if he got angry or upset, it wasn't uncommon for him to just walk away from the situation, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, he had done that once with you.
Yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I just have a couple questions. Mm-hmm. Counsel asked you about Exhibit 35, which is down there, and if you like, I can put it back up in front of you.
I don't want to reach over. Knock.
Yes.
I don't want to knock anything over. Thank you.
In terms of these messages here, counsel asked you if you recall deleting any messages. Is what we're looking at in Exhibit 35 a picture of your phone or the record from the Text Plus company?
This is a record from the Text Plus company.
And the final 3 text messages from Text Plus, sissy, 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 that's 8:23 Pacific time, so 9:23 Colorado time. And kitty, 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 9:26, and then is pimpin', 9:37. And that's the last communication, that night, the last communication you have with him.
Yes.
And just to be clear, counsel asked about is pimping, whether that was out of character for Dylan, and I think he said is pimping all the time.
Over text, yes.
Yes, over text. But how about the conversation ending that way? In other words, being done for the night, would it normally end with Dylan with something like his tempting, or would it end with I have to go do something overnight, stuff like that?
It would depend. If it was something where I didn't respond, usually it wasn't too typical of him to respond to me until the next morning. But other than that, he would usually end it with like a night on his end, or like he was usually the one to end the conversation.
Never heard from him again after that.
Yes.
I have nothing further from Ms. Saxton. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I would ask, not yet, actually, I'll wait for the jury questions. Sorry.
Thank you. Any questions from the jury? No? Do you want her excused?
Yes, Your Honor, please.
Any objection?
We don't ask that you remain under service.
Okay, what that means, are you living in Alamosa?
Yes.
Talk to one of the two people sitting over there on the left. Give them your phone number. You may need to come back. You may not.
Okay.
So you can't be paying attention to what's going on in the courtroom. If there's anything in the news or anything on, you look at it online until they tell you you don't need to come back. If you do need to come back, they need to make arrangements to have you come back. We're scheduled to go through the end of July.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So one of the two of you can talk to her. They just need to have your contact information. All right?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
Your next witness?
Your Honor, the people call Adam Harvey to the stand.
Mr. Harvey, come up to the witness stand up here, please. Right there. And before you sit down, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, have a seat. And there are some rights in regard to people testifying, not your rights, other people's rights, that people are entitled to see your face. Are you okay taking off your mask while you testify? Or not? You gotta be louder.
I prefer not to.
Okay, well, it's not really doing a whole lot, but
Better?
I'm okay with that. Any objection to that from who's ever doing Mr. Harvey or Mr. Doherty?
No objection from the people, Your Honor.
Defense? Okay. With that, I do want to talk to the two of you up out of the hearing of the jury. So, if, Mr. Doherty and Mr. Moran, you come up for a second. Sure.
Thank you, Honor. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I could be better, but
A lot of people who sit in that chair feel that way, but I'm going to only have you on the stand for a short period of time, and we do appreciate you being there, okay? So I know it's strange to be in a courtroom surrounded by all these people, but what might make it easier for all of us is if you could pull that microphone closer to you, or you closer to the microphone, that would help us be able to hear your voice.
is that better?
That is terrific. The court reporter has to type down everything that you and I say, so that's why the microphone is really important, and also the jury, of course, wants to hear what you have to say.
Of course.
What's your full name?
Adam Garrett Harvey,
Mr. Harvey, how old are you?
21 years old.
Where are you currently living?
Colorado Springs, Colorado.
How long have you been living in the Colorado Springs area for?
Since I was born, man.
In 2012, and I'm going to ask you to talk, the juror is struggling, I'm going to ask you to talk as loud as you need to so that I can hear you over there, okay?
All right.
2012, how old were you?
12 years old.
What grade were you in at the start of 2012?
12 years old. My birthday is in January, so I just turned 12.
Where were you going to school?
Haven Middle School.
All right.
Haven Middle School.
Where was that located?
Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Who were some of your closer friends during 2012?
I only had a couple, but I had a friend of Joseph Bios, Cristen, Baird, Dylan Redwine. That's pretty much it.
Can you really project, please, because it is hard to hear.
I'm
All right?
sorry.
And understand. It's okay. You're not used to this.
I'm sorry.
Okay. It really is okay. I know it's a strange experience, and we all understand that. Again, just keep your eyes back towards here and project your voice to me, okay?
All right.
But I have to have you close to the microphone, too, okay? So as you can get to the lectern.
Project your voice back to here.
All right.
Because we've been getting a lot of complaints from
Yeah,
people
sure.
watching this everywhere. I'm trying to keep people not being here, so this is better.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. Joseph Bios, Cristen, Baird, Dylan Redwine were your close friends in 2012.
Yes, sir.
How did you meet Dylan?
One day I was sitting out front just passing the football with Joe, and I had seen Dylan across the street, and he was throwing the football around with himself, so I had asked Joe to ask him to come over and join us.
Had Dylan recently moved to that neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
Who was he living with in that neighborhood?
His mom, being honest, I don't remember the stepfather's name, but he was living within his mom's house across the street from me.
So his house was located across the street from yours.
Yes, sir.
Who were you living with at the time, Mr. Harvey?
My mom and father.
And what would you and Dylan do when you were hanging out together during the course of your time as friends?
Most of the time, man, we were just being your normal, everyday kids running the neighborhood, playing football, sports.
And how would you communicate with Dylan?
Text messaging, or usually just face-to-face. I'd come home from school. He'd already be on my front porch, ready with the football.
How often would you guys hang out, Mr. Harvey?
Every single day.
When you text with Dylan, how quickly, generally speaking, would he text you back?
Instantly, pretty much.
Can you describe for the jury how Dylan was as a person, what his mood was, how he conducted himself?
Dylan was the type when he walked in the room, man, he'd light up the room, everybody smiled. I was caught positive energy from him, and that's the best way I could describe him, honestly. It's all positive.
Dylan ever talk with you about running away or hurting himself?
No, sir.
Do you recall November of 2012?
Briefly.
Do you recall a couple specific dates, November 17th and 18th of 2012?
Maybe not specific dates, but I could remember events.
Okay. So the jury is hearing evidence about what happened to Dylan.
Okay.
Do you recall the last time you saw Dylan?
Date-wise, I couldn't, but it was the day before he was issued to go out to Durango.
Okay.
It was the night before,
So can we talk about that?
of course.
So I'm going to ask you to take us through where and when you last saw Dylan.
We were at Joe's house the night before. We were up kind of late, I'd say 2, 3 in the morning, eating snacks, playing around. And last time I had seen him was literally that night, because by the time I woke up, he was gone. He was gone to catch the fight to Durango. Last contact I had with him was when he texted me that he was here and that he was there. He was going to show my father playing.
I'm going to break that down a little bit, okay?
All right.
But that's exactly the date or day that I want to ask you questions.
All right.
Okay. Where were you guys going to sleep over that night?
We were originally going to ask my mom to stay, but we had already stayed there the night prior, so she had said no. So we went down to Joe's grandpa and asked him, and so we stayed at Joe's grandpa's house.
Okay. So you stayed at your mom's house the night before.
Before that night.
Then you asked if they could stay over again. Your mom says no.
Yep.
You guys asked
Joe's
grandfather?
Yep.
And he says yes.
Yep.
So what you just described is you guys sleeping over Joe's grandfather's house.
Yep.
And that's Joe Ceballos.
Yes.
And are you aware Joe Ceballos is going to testify later today?
Yes.
What did the three of you do during the course of that night with Joe Ceballos?
We built a fort in the basement. Built our own little sections, had our own little snacks, watched movies.
How was the mood that night?
Great.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at, it's been marked as peoples 1, 2, and 3. They've been previously provided to you and shown to counsel.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may. Yes.
Can you take a look at each of those 3 exhibits, please, Mr. Harvey? Do you recognize those?
I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
Pictures of me, Joe, and Dylan.
And is that from the final day you saw Dylan live?
No, sir.
And when were those? When do you believe those pictures were taken?
It's hard to say. It's hard for me to remember, honestly. But it was around that time,
Okay. So it was around that time.
give or take.
And who's in those pictures?
And Exhibit 1 is Joe and Dylan. Exhibit 2, it's all 3 of us. Me, Joe, and Dylan. And Exhibit 3, again, all 3 of us.
Around the time of the final sleepover.
Yes, sir.
Do those photos fairly and accurately reflect how you guys looked at that time?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd move peoples 1, 2, and 3 into evidence.
Mr. Moran? They'll be admitted.
We're going to put Exhibit 1 on the screen behind you, and you can also look at it on the photo in front of you. Who do we see in this photograph?
Joe and Dylan. And you can see the side of my head.
So why don't we go to Exhibit 2 then? So actually, can we go back to Exhibit 1? Sorry. Exhibit 1, you see at the bottom the slide to unlock feature on the phone. So this is the background on the phone. Why don't we go to Exhibit 2 then? What do we see in Exhibit 2?
Me, Joe, and Dylan, all close.
And who's who in this photograph?
Dylan is the one with the hat with the green brim. And Joe is the one in the middle. I'm the one with the beanie on the head.
And how about Exhibit 3, please? What do we have here, Mr. Harvey?
Again, Dylan in the Blue Devils hat and Joe in the middle with me on the other side with the beanie.
You recall this being around the time of the sleepover?
Around.
Where was Dylan going after the sleepover, Mr. Harvey? You mentioned that he woke up and he was gone, to your recollection.
Mm-hmm.
Where was he going?
He was going to see his dad in Durango.
Did you have the impression that he wanted to visit his father or no?
Specifically about his father, I never.
Let me just ask you to listen to the question here. Okay. Did you have the impression that he wanted to visit his father? If you could answer with a yes or no without getting into too much detail.
Sorry, can you ask the question one more time? My bad.
Sure. Did you have the impression, the understanding, that Dylan wanted to go visit his father or not?
Why? Okay, you've had the microphone. Why?
Perhaps this is a good time to approach. The objection would be based on an impression being different than the court's ruling that we were discussing. Impressions and what is admissible under Your Honor's rulings are two different things.
I don't think impression is different. Mr. Doherty did clarify whether or not he wanted to go, which was part of my ruling, is my understanding, what we just talked about up here. So the question is, did Dylan want to go see his dad at Thanksgiving? We just want a yes or a no.
I would never ask that question.
Okay, all right. What was your last communication with Dylan?
That text message of the plane, the picture of the plane saying that he was here, or that he was there, or that he had landed.
I'm just going to break that down a little bit, okay? He sent you a picture of a plane saying what?
I'm here.
I'm here. Okay. How did you find out that Dylan was missing?
I had seen it on the news.
Your Honor, I have nothing further. Mr. Harvey, thank you very much.
Okay. Defense?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harvey, you doing all right?
Yes, sir.
I'll keep it brief. You mentioned that you thought perhaps that you guys had been up until 2 or 3 in the morning. Are you guessing at that, or do you recall? There's some information that suggests that you were up like before 4 a.m.
It's more of a guess. It's so long ago, it's hard to recall.
So you wouldn't disagree with anyone asserting that you were up until 4 a.m.?
No.
And fair to say, up until 4 a.m., goofing around, having fun.
I'm sorry?
Fair to say that up until 4 a.m., goofing around, having fun.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that with respect to this case, the first time you spoke with them was in July of 2014?
I'm confused. I'm having confusion of the question.
Sure, and maybe it'll help if I just say what I'm getting at. There was some time between Dylan's disappearance and when you first had any conversations with law enforcement.
I had no conversation with law enforcement before this case.
Okay. And perhaps, do you recall speaking with law enforcement about this case, but it was a long time after Dylan went missing? It was July 2014.
No, I rejected any offer from any media talking.
Okay. How about police? Do you remember when you spoke with them?
I never had to talk to the police, so.
You never spoke to the police about this case?
I do not believe so.
Do you remember speaking with Investigator Heidel here, this gentleman in the blue tie?
Yes.
Obviously, you were aware that Dylan was missing in November or December of 2012, right?
Yes, sir.
And this gentleman that you spoke with, who's sitting over here with the prosecutors, you spoke with him many years later, right? Like
Yes.
2020 or so?
Yes.
So you didn't reach out to law enforcement around the time Dylan's remains had been discovered?
No, sir.
I know that this was a long time ago, and there's a method by which I can refresh your recollection if you don't remember. But on November 17th, 2012, do you remember that you wanted Dylan to stay at your house?
Yes, sir.
So that was the night before he flew to Durango.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But your mom said no. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And you said, Ma, he's leaving town for a couple of days. I'm sure it's not cool for him to come hang at night.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember, was that annoying or embarrassing as a 13-year-old that you couldn't have your friend over?
No.
No.
I went to my next option down the train.
I'm sorry?
I went to my next option that I had, so we went straight to Joe's grandpa, so I had another option. I didn't think too much of it.
So when Mom said no, you figured a way around it, a workaround, basically. And that's consistent with how things go as a 13-year-old, at least with you, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it would go with your friend group, right?
Mm-hmm.
If one parent says no,
We're going to the next.
we'll figure out a way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You and Dylan played basketball in addition to football, right?
Yes, sir.
And fair to say Dylan liked to throw the football.
Yes, sir.
Dylan Redwine liked to play football a lot. That was common with you two.
Fully athletic.
But, and when you guys played football, were you wearing pads?
No, sir.
Did playing football cause him to have scratches?
Time to time, maybe.
Scratches on his knees?
Yeah, maybe falling on the street, trying to dive, catch the football.
Right on. You guys were tough enough to play football on the street?
Oh, yeah.
And is it touch football or tackle football on the street?
Touch.
But still diving for catches and that
Yeah,
kind of thing?
still going to make plays.
Right on. And when you say Dylan is fully athletic, part of what you're talking about is that he'd lay himself out to catch the ball.
Yeah, he was always about how high he could jump and everything he would do with any type of sport that he played.
So the kind of kid, when he plays ball, sacrifices his body to make the play.
Yep.
And sometimes that's what we're talking about, right? That's how he ends up with scratches and whatnot. But
yeah.
And Dylan, when he's throwing a football, he's not, like, even at the time, he wasn't throwing ducks, right? He could throw a spiral.
Oh, yeah, he was very gifted.
And on occasions when you guys were having sleepovers, Dylan, you guys would go exploring, right?
No, sir.
You guys didn't go sneaking out at night?
No.
So on an occasion when you guys were sleeping over together, you just stayed in the house and built forts?
Or out front of Joe's grandpa's shooting the basketball till 10 or 11 at night.
And then there were occasions with Joe's grandfather where you guys were getting some heat from Grandpa for sneaking out, right?
As I recall, no.
Okay. You don't remember Joe having to tell you guys, if you keep sneaking out, my grandpa's not going to let you stay here anymore?
No, sir.
You don't remember that?
No, sir.
That wasn't anything communicated to you, at least?
No, sir.
When on direct examination, you were speaking with Mr. Doherty. What I heard was that you said those photographs were taken sometime around when Dylan left, right?
Yes, sir.
So it was not exactly on November 17th. Is that right?
Correct. I could not personally date the date of those pictures.
But you were able to remember that those photographs were taken by Cristen Baird?
Or her brother.
Sounds like you've had an opportunity to review the report that Mr. Heidel took. Is that fair? You've reviewed that report?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again, sir?
Sure. Sounds like you've had an opportunity to review the report Mr. Heidel here wrote, right? Is that why you're remembering these details right now?
No. I'm going strictly off my memory.
Right on. You haven't met with these guys and prepared your testimony?
I mean, I have this.
And did you review the reports that have been written in your preparation?
No, I did not.
But you're remembering, without having looked at that report, that those photographs were taken in days before November 17th, 2012, right?
Yes, sir.
And after those photos had been taken, you played football a few times, right?
Yeah.
But definitely played football on November 17th, 2012, right?
We definitely probably passed the ball around, yeah. But maybe not a full game.
Okay. You're aware that Dylan liked to go fishing, is that right?
Me and Dylan never had a conversation at fishing, no.
You guys never went and went fishing together?
No, sir.
That was more something from Durango. You guys didn't do that in Colorado Springs?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I think it has been. Ask a different question, please.
And did you discuss with Dylan that he had the guts to go hitchhiking?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Right, you're aware that Dylan had the guts to go hitchhiking, that he had hitchhiked on occasion?
I mean, here in Colorado, we just stayed around in the neighborhood, so I wouldn't know nothing of hitchhiking.
You don't remember Dylan talking about that to you?
No, sir.
That night before Dylan left for Durango, was Cristen Baird hanging out that night?
No, sir.
But you mentioned that Cristen Baird, Joe Ceballos, and Dylan Redwine were your good pals at the time, right?
Yes.
And Cristen Baird was Dylan's girlfriend that November, right?
They were on and off. I couldn't tell you whether they were together or not.
She was a year older than you guys, right?
Yes, sir. A year older than me. Her age regulation to Dylan, I don't know.
Okay.
If you want water, go ahead.
And then you don't have any recollection of Dylan's departure on the morning of the 17th. I beg your pardon, on the morning of the 18th, because you were asleep.
Yes, sir.
And it wasn't unusual at that age to sleep in. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, one more time?
But when you were 13 years old, it was common to sleep in. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
Can you redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So Dylan never spoke with you or went hitchhiking with you?
No.
Counsel asked you on cross-examination about your recollection, your memory of an interview which you gave to law enforcement on July 8th of 2014. I think your testimony was you don't remember.
Yeah.
Your Honor, may I approach and show the witness People's Discovery page 903? I'm going to ask you to take a look at the page on the computer and then see if it refreshes your recollection. I'll have some follow-up questions for you.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have a chance to read it, Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Can I come grab the computer from you?
Yes, you can, sir.
You may, that's fine.
July of 2014, about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
That refreshed my memory a little bit, yes.
Okay. So refresh your memory as to the interview you had on July 8th.
Yeah, the words that were on that page, I remember saying or making that statement.
Remember telling the investigator that Dylan didn't have any chapped lips, sores, or injuries?
I do.
Remember telling the investigator that you had the impression that Dylan did not want to go to his father's?
Yeah, every time if we brought it up, he didn't want to talk about it.
You had the impression that he did not want to go.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for Mr. Harvey. Mr. Harvey, thank you very much for being here today. We do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, any questions from the jury? Doesn't look like it. You want Mr. Harvey excused?
Yes, please, Your Honor.
Mr. Moran?
Under 5210-201, I think we made it, he needs to remain available.
Well, you're going to have to get him back. You're going to have to arrange all that. So, Mr. Harvey, what you're going to need to do on your way out of here is talk to one of the two investigators that are sitting on the left side of the courtroom. One of them will get up and talk to you. They need contact information from you. You may have to come back since you're under subpoena. Don't know that you will, but you're not allowed to follow this case in the paper until you've been told by them that you don't have to come back. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So you're good for today. Thank you. Next witness.
Your Honor, the people call Cristen Baird to the stand.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Baird, come up to the witness stand up here, please. Straight up here. And before you sit down, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, have a seat. Just have a seat. You're looking upset before we even start, so if that becomes a problem, you need to take a break. Let me know, okay? I'm trying to do 2 or 3 different things up here at once, so I may not notice right away. All right, just let me know. So if you need water, you can have one of those bottles there. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
Please state your full name, spelling your last name for the record.
Cristen, Cristen, Baird, Baird.
Might help if you pull the microphone to you or move yourself closer to the microphone.
Cristen Baird, Cristen, Baird, Baird.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you through a number of questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
How old are you, Ms. Baird?
22.
What area do you currently live in?
Colorado Springs.
How long have you lived in the Springs for?
12, 13 years.
Are you working currently?
Yes.
Okay. What do you do for work?
Wendy's.
What do you do at Wendy's?
I'm like a crew. I work window, take orders, and clean.
Good. How long have you been working there for?
Like 2-3 months.
Who are you currently living with?
I live in my own apartment with my boyfriend.
Were you living in Colorado Springs in 2012?
Yes.
Do you have a boyfriend at that time?
Technically.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Dylan was my boyfriend.
Now, when you say technically, is that because the two of you were so young?
We were, He had moved, so we were deciding since he had moved whether or not we should stay together.
So you're getting upset, and as the court said, if you need a break, you let us know, okay? There's water there for you as well, and then there's tissues to your left, okay? How did you first meet Dylan?
He lived across the street from me,
What neighborhood?
like mad, like,
Not your address, just the area of Colorado Springs.
like North Carefree,
You mentioned he was moving. Where was he moving to?
Monument,
Monument's located close to Colorado Springs,
yes,
but not right in the same town.
no,
Who was Dylan living with at the time?
his mom.
How did you first meet Dylan?
We were all actually outside, and he was with my other best friends, Adam and Joe. And I walked up to them because I didn't know who Dylan was. And we all just introduced, like they introduced me to Dylan, and we all were super close then because Adam and me were already close, me and Joe were already close, and then Dylan fit right in
How often would you hang out with Dylan?
every day.
Were you going to the same school as him at that point?
No,
Where did you go to school?
Russell Middle School.
Where did Dylan go to school?
I believe Monument. I didn't know the actual school.
I'd like you to describe for the jury, what was Dylan like as a person?
He was amazing. Like, he always had a smile on his face. He, if you were upset, he would brighten your day. Right now, I know he'd be telling me he's proud that I'm here, and, you know, he's just he was the happiest person ever.
Had he ever talked about running away or hurting himself?
No,
And how often would the two of you talk?
every day.
And how would that happen? Was that in person, text? How did it go?
Both.
And when you would text Dylan, how quickly would he respond usually?
Quickly.
What was his relationship like with his mother, to your knowledge?
They were very close. He loved his mom more than anything.
When was the last time you saw Dylan, Ms. Baird?
The last day he left.
Where was he leaving for?
Here.
Rango area?
And I know you're upset, but can we have that a yes or a no, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Court reporter, I know that I could tell this is really hard. The court reporter types down everything that you and I say so we have a record. Okay? So I'd like to talk to you about the last time you saw Dylan. Okay? Where was that?
My house.
How'd that come about? Can you tell the jury?
He was leaving, so he wanted to say goodbye to me before he came down. And it wasn't really a great conversation.
Can I stop you there for a second? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Where had Dylan been the night before?
I believe he stayed the night at Adam's.
And who had he spent the night with?
Adam.
Anyone else?
Maybe Joe.
And what did you guys do during that day?
So we were all, we actually came to my house. We were just all saying goodbye. We hung out, took some pictures, just talked about, like, what was gonna be going on and when he'd be back.
Where was Dylan going?
Here, Durango.
For what?
See his father.
For what reason?
Technically, the court told him he had to go.
Is that a conversation you had with Dylan that
Yes.
day? You mentioned that he was going to be leaving. Where was his mom going to be picking him up that day?
My house.
Did his mom come and pick him up eventually?
Yeah, because they used to live on my street, so she picked him up, like, right at the end of the driveway.
Did that?
Yeah, so I ran down crying. saying bye.
How much time did you spend together that day?
It wasn't a long time because he had to make the plane.
You mentioned taking some photos. Who were those photos of, Ms. Baird?
So we all took photos together. But the main photos that I have is Dylan with Adam and Joe on each side on my couch.
And that was on the day Dylan was leaving to come to the Durango area?
Yes.
Ronna, can I approach the witness and show her what's been admitted as peoples 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
I'm going to put Exhibit 1 on the screen behind you, but you can also look at the one in front of you if you like. When I say Exhibit 1, it has a sticker in the corner that says 1, okay? What is this a photograph of?
Joe, Dylan, and Adam's actually not in this photo. But they took like a really close selfie photo. It kind of got like to where it like moved up. This kind of looks like he might have like had it as his like cover photo maybe. Because
Cover photo, what do you mean by that?
like the back of your like phone, like you can like your lock screen or your home screen to make it like the background to like when you open your phone, you see that every day.
Okay, so let's go to Exhibit 2. What are we looking at here, Ms. Baird?
So behind Dylan, Joe, and Adam is my brother. They were taking a super goofy photo. We were all really close. So, I mean, they told each other they loved each other all the time. So, I mean, it was just like a super funny photo that they wanted to take. And my brother was in the background and he was doing something super funny too. So.
Where was this photo taken?
My couch, like in my parents' house.
The day Dylan was leaving for the Durango area.
Yes.
We'll go to Exhibit 3. How about this one?
On my couch.
Okay. And who's in this photograph?
Dylan, Joe, and Adam.
Did you observe any cuts, sores, or chapped lips on Dylan that day?
No.
Did you see any in these photographs?
No.
Were you aware that Dylan had lived in the Bayfield, Durango area previously?
Yes.
You're a smart person, so you're able to guess that you see where my questions are going, but for the court reporter, she always wants me to finish before you go, okay?
Yeah.
That's why she just gave me that look.
Sorry.
That's okay. She gave me the look because she knows I'm the one I'm supposed to know. It's not your fault. Okay. So now he's going to be flying out that day back to the Durango area. I believe you said to visit his father because of the court order.
Yes.
How did Dylan seem about visiting his friends in this area?
That's all he cared about.
What do you mean?
That's the only reason he wanted to come to Durango.
Was it your impression Dylan did not want to visit his father
No.
at that time?
Sorry. No.
Let's clarify that. No meaning no, that wasn't your impression, or no, he didn't want to come.
He did not want to see his father.
Thank you.
You and the others urged him to stay in the Springs? Or talk to him about why he had to go?
Yes.
And what was the reason he had to go?
He was mandated by the court order to come see his dad.
What was his mood and demeanor before leaving for the airport on that day?
He was not excited. He was excited to see his friends. He didn't really bring up much of his dad because he was not really looking forward to it.
Do you remember him leaving?
Yes.
What do you remember?
I remember him saying he was leaving to me. He walked outside my door. And then for some reason I started running after him because I was like, this is For some reason,
Let me stop you there. You're running after him before when he's meeting up with his mom.
yes.
What was your emotional state at that?
I didn't want him to go.
When did you find out Dylan was missing?
Less than 24 hours.
How'd you find out, Ms. Baird?
So Adam and Joe called me right after school, and they're like, Cristen, you really need to come over. And then I came over, and instantly they told me that he was gone, like missing.
And what was it like over the days and weeks that followed for you?
Very hard.
When and how did you find out that Dylan's remains have been found?
On the news.
And I have no further questions from Ms. Baird. Ms. Baird, thank you for being here today.
Okay. Mr. Moran?
Good morning, Ms. Baird.
Morning.
Doing all right?
Yeah.
If for any reason you need to take a break, I will make sure that the judge knows that and that we'll advocate on your behalf to do that if things get too much, okay? But I think that this should be quick. And I want to just make sure I understood something that you were saying a moment ago. My understanding is that you were born in 1998, right?
Correct.
So on
October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
October what?
2nd?
Of 1998, your birthday?
Yes.
So on the day that you were spending, the last day that you spent time with Dylan, you would have been 14.
Yes.
And what time was it that Dylan departed on that day?
I want to say around 3 or 4 maybe. It was a while back, so I don't know.
Sure, but leaving in the afternoon.
Yes.
And that was the day before, or the day he went to Durango.
Yes.
And it was the actual day that he was gone
Yes.
to Durango.
He was leaving. Yes.
So it was November the 18th, 2012, when you saw Dylan move.
The 17th. The 18th was when he went missing.
Okay. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit. He was 13 at the time that you were spending time together, November 17th or so.
Yes.
And the impression, or what stood out to me is that you guys were calling each other boyfriend, girlfriend. Is that right?
Yes.
And in 2012, he expressed preferring to stay with you for the Thanksgiving holiday. Is that right?
To stay with me during
Right,
Thanksgiving?
that he would have preferred to stay in Colorado
Yes.
Springs and to stay with you.
Yes.
Right?
Your Honor. Yes. I'm sorry. Objection. I believe it's a compound question about staying in the Colorado Springs area and or with her. We can just break that down a little bit.
Sure.
I'm not meaning that he was going to spend the entire time, like, not that you guys had an apartment together or something, but that he was going to, if he had stuck around, he would have spent time with you, right?
Yes, understood.
And his preference for the Thanksgiving holiday and time away from school would have been to spend time with you, is what he was saying.
Yes. And friends.
And then, so it was in the afternoon that you saw him getting picked up by his mom, right?
Yeah.
And you had spent the day with him preceding his pickup by his mom?
He came like for the whole weekend.
I see. So then he'd stayed the night, you guys had all stayed together the night before?
Technically not me. I didn't stay the night.
I see.
Parents were strict, so, you know, girls, guys.
Sure. And you were telling Dylan, don't go. You were telling him to stay with you, right?
Yes.
It was surprising to you that the police didn't reach out to you early on. Is that right?
I don't recall.
Do Do you recall that it was 5 years after Dylan went missing before you were first contacted by a law enforcement official?
I don't recall.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at a report written by the person you spoke with?
Sure.
May I approach?
Yes.
This thing on. So I'm going to have you just look here at line 8, so on the left side of this document, 18,593. Line 8, because it's 8, and then the description there of the quote application. Just look at it yourself. Like, no one can just look at it. And then you can tell me if it refreshes your recollection. Does that make sense? That's sort of the last.
Yes.
Ms. Baird, may I interrupt? So my question is, would looking at that report refresh your recollection with respect to the date that you spoke to law enforcement? Do you see the date on there? And I'm not asking you to read it out loud. I'm just inquiring whether you see it.
Yes, I see it.
And does seeing this report and the date there refresh your recollection as to when you spoke with law enforcement?
A little, but not much.
Okay. You order permission to say?
Yes.
So, Ms. Baird, strictly with respect to the date, does this refresh your recollection that you spoke with Mr. Heidel here, this gentleman, on August 2nd, 2017?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And that would be the first time that you spoke with law enforcement in this case, right?
I believe so. There might have been one case where I did speak to a law enforcement when he was still missing.
Do you remember who that was?
It was at the high school when everybody got together to talk about him missing.
Okay. So you might have?
Yes, I was. The news reported me and everything. Took video, took notes, and then, if I recall correctly, there was some law enforcement there.
Do you remember saying, in speaking with Mr. Heidel, that you did not recall having been interviewed by law enforcement at the time Dylan went missing?
I can't recall.
It makes sense. I mean, it's a long time
Long
ago.
time.
Would it perhaps refresh your recollection to show you this report?
Possibly.
Okay. May I approach?
Yes.
And I'm going to direct your attention here to lines 34 and 35. This is page 18,593 of Discovery again.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so Mr. Moran, you have to speak up. That microphone is not going to work unless you hit the mute button. I think it turns itself off. It went off. So if you look at it, there's a mute button. Or the battery's dead. Is the light on? Okay, it's on. All right.
What I'm directing you at is lines 34 and 35. Does that refresh your recollection?
It does not. It's still a blur.
And please try and stay close to the microphone when you're at your table.
So your recollection is not refreshed about this statement, but you do remember speaking to Mr. Heidel?
Yes.
Okay. And you do remember that that was approximately August 2nd, 2017, right?
Yes, very long time.
Mr. Heidel here and a prosecutor, and they were asking you questions about this case. you remember that?
Yes.
And you were answering those questions honestly. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you understood that this was important and that it was part of the case?
Correct.
And it was in preparation for testimony is what you were being told, right?
Correct.
And you do not have any recollection of telling them that you had not been interviewed by law enforcement at the time Dylan went missing.
That was back to August 2nd, 2017. It's been about 4 years now, so I don't recall.
Sure.
It was 4 years, so I mean, I've had a lot of conversations.
Okay.
I did have a conversation with them, but I don't recall back to 2017. It's been a very long time.
So I'm asking you to look back through the sands of times. And just so that this is clear, it's that you said you did not recall having been interviewed by law enforcement. You don't even remember that part, right?
Again, it's just a little bit of a blurred.
Understood. Over the years, you have kept up with Dylan's mom, right?
Yes.
Do you recall telling Dylan that you were scared of him making the trip?
Yes.
And you recall that Dylan told you not to be scared?
Yes.
He told you, quote, it was going to be fine.
Yes.
And he told you everything was going to be okay, correct?
Correct.
One of the things that was surprising to you about him leaving or having to leave is that Dylan had not seen his father in 4 years, correct?
Correct.
He spent the day with you until his mom came to pick him up, right?
Yes.
And during that time, you told him that you thought something bad was going to happen, right?
Correct.
On November 17th, 2012, do you recall also telling Dylan that you wanted to kill someone?
Excuse me?
On November 17th, 2012, do you recall telling Dylan that you wanted to kill someone?
That I?
Yes, ma'am.
No, sir.
Are you objecting?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's relevant, I'm assuming, or
Yes, Your Honor.
is there any relevance to that?
Well, it's going to be a speaking description of what the relevance is.
And if I could say something?
Stop. No, you can't. I'm sorry. It's not a normal conversation. It'd probably be better if you could make this decision, but you can't.
That's all right. Tell me why you think it's relevant.
Because it was in a text message on November the 17th. In a discussion between the two of them, it bears out the point that 13-year-olds are occasionally more dramatic than the rest of us. It fills in other testimony by this witness and gives the jury a view of how 13-year-olds talk to each other, and that the running out to the car and that kind of thing is consistent with, for lack of a more gentle way to say it, how kids are kind of dramatic on occasion. And there was a discussion about killing people at around that time.
The objection sustained. The jury, every one of them was 13 at one point. I think they know what a 13-year-old's like. Number two, you have got to speak up. I mean, I'm having trouble hearing it, and I want to make sure the jury hears you. So project, please.
That's it. Thanks. No further questions.
Baird,
Yes.
counsel asked you about being scared where
Yes.
Dylan was going.
Yes.
And that's, you were worried something bad was going to happen.
Yes.
Before I ask my next question, I'd like to approach the bench.
Yes,
if I may, Your
I think
Honor.
you should.
you had the impression Dylan did not want to go visit his father.
Correct.
You mentioned, I believe on cross, that you attended a vigil or a memorial of some kind.
Correct.
Did you attend more than one over the years?
For him?
Dylan, yes.
Just the one that they had
Where was that?
during, well, Bayfield.
How did you get to Bayfield for the vigil?
I rode with Adam's parents and him.
Counsel asked you about a conversation you had with Investigator Heidel in 2017. Are you aware that's the same year charges were filed against the defendant in this case?
It was a blurred year. Don't remember too much. Of course, speaking a couple of times maybe about the case, yes, but not really the sentence or anything like that. It was very blurred.
I know it's been a long time. I think everyone understands that. Do you have a clear memory of the last time you saw Dylan?
Yeah.
Where was he going when you last saw him?
To, here,
Who was he leaving with?
his mom's.
Your Honor, I have nothing further. Thank you very much, Ms. Baird.
Any questions from the jury? So based on our conversation, you don't want to release her at this time? Or do you?
You know what, Your Honor, if we could have Ms. Baird on the subpoena for the rest of the day, I'd appreciate it.
All right. After today, are you going to want to have, are you okay with having her released? Okay, thank you. So it means you can't be in here, you can't talk to anybody about what's going on in here until after today. After that, she'll be done. You may not be coming back, you may, I don't know. We'll see. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. So you can step down. This would probably be a good time to take our lunch recess, I would assume, since there's some research that some of us need to do over the lunch hour. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me find my admonitions for you. At some point, I'll quit reading them to you because you'll know them by heart, but I'm going to go through them again. So, please do not discuss this case either amongst yourselves or with anyone else during the course of the trial. Do not initiate, post, respond to anything about this case on social media. In fairness to the parties of this lawsuit, you should keep an open mind throughout the trial, and you should reach your decision only during your final deliberations. Do not permit any third person to discuss this case in your presence. If anyone attempts to do so, report that fact to me immediately. Do not talk with any witnesses or the defendant or the lawyers in the case. In fact, as I told you before, lawyers probably won't even talk to you. Do not attempt to gather any information on your own. Do not engage in any outside reading on this case. Do not attempt to visit any places mentioned in the case. Do not read about the case in the newspaper, obtain information about it on radio, television, internet, social media, or other media source. Do not learn about this case outside of the courtroom, as you need to base your verdict solely on the evidence presented at trial. So talk to Cindy before you leave about where to meet up. We will start up again at 1:20. So please get there, I think 10 minutes early, but whatever she tells you, and it'll be that middle door. So everybody rise for the jury, please.